For our lesson tonight, for this our mission, the armor of God, we turn to the book of Judges. And there was at that time Deborah, a prophetess, who judged the people, and she sat under a palm tree. And the children of Israel came to her for all judgment. And she sent and called Barak. And she said to him, "The Lord God of Israel hath commanded thee, go and lead an army to Mount Tabor, and thou shalt take with thee 10,000 fighting men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun. And I will bring unto thee in the place of the torrent Sison, Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, and his chariots and all his multitude, and will deliver them into thy hand." Barak said to Deborah, "If thou wilt come with me, I will go. If thou wilt not come with me, I will not go." She said to him, "I will go indeed with thee, but at this time the victory shall not be attributed to thee, because Sisera shall be delivered into the hand of a woman." Deborah therefore arose and went with Barak to Cheres. And he called unto him Zebulun and Naphtali. And it was told Sisera that Barak was gone up to Mount Tabor. And they went up 10,000 fighting men, having Deborah in his company. And Sisera gathered together his 900 chariots armed with scythes and all his army. And Deborah said to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day wherein the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thy hands. Behold, he, the Lord, is thy leader." And Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 fighting men with him. And the Lord struck a terror into Sisera, and to all his chariots and all his multitude, with the edge of the sword. At the sight of Barak, insomuch that Sisera, leaping down from off his chariot, fled away on foot. And Barak pursued after the fleeting chariots and the army unto Hasaroth and of the Gentiles. And all the multitude of the enemies was utterly destroyed. But Sisera, fleeing, came to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber, the Chenite. And so Jael took a nail of the tent, and taking also a hammer, and going in softly and with silence, she put the nail upon the temples of Sisera's head, and striking it with the hammer, drove it through his brain fast into the ground. And so, passing from deep sleep to death, Sisera fainted away and died. In the 13th chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel, we hear His Majesty tell us some parables, the parables of the kingdom of heaven, one of which reads, "The kingdom of heaven is like unto a treasure hidden in a field, which a man having found hid it, and for joy thereof goeth, and selleth all that he hath, and buyeth that field." In the same chapter, we also hear this, "I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter things hidden from the foundation of the world." In Solomon's description of the valiant woman in Proverbs chapter 31, he thus begins, "Who shall find a valiant woman? Far and from the uttermost coast is the price of her." If we take the field from the parable of the hidden treasure to be the land between the coasts of all space and time, from the beginning to the very end of the world, we can indeed find the valiant woman, and we can learn the price of her. She's in the middle, standing at the foot of the cross. It is Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, ever victorious Queen. In forming His plan for creation, God searched the field from coast to coast, from beginning to the end, to find this virago. That is the name of Eve before the fall, meaning manly, heroic maiden, a heroine, the valiant woman. God searched from coast to coast, from the beginning to the end, to find this virago, to find the hidden treasure in which heaven is likened. And find it God did in this woman. He then joyfully went unto the cross to give his all, even to the last drop of his blood, to buy the treasure and then reveal it for all to enjoy. In making the world out of nothing, ex nihilo, God made it from love. His love is so powerful, it draws this beautiful creation out of nothing. What infinite love is God's? What infinite power and goodness is our God? To put this love on display for all creation, God chose from the foundation of the world to enter his creation, into his world, through the valiant woman, the Mother of God, Blessed Mary, and to die on the cross at the center, to stretch it out to its Alpha and Omega. This makes the cross the most loving and most powerful event of all time. And this is why the cross is exalted. It's indispensable. It taps into that love that made us from nothing. It is foundational. To do good that counts, therefore, we need the cross, but there's somebody else we need too, who's at the bottom, at the foot of the cross. That virago, that valiant, heroic woman standing on Calvary. Struggles put us at the foot of the cross, and the cross at the gate of heaven, says St. John Vianney. And Our Lady is always waiting for us there in both places, at the foot of the cross and at the gate of heaven. They go together always. His Majesty's cross, Our Lady in heaven, they go together. Now let's see how she uses that power down through time. As we heard at the start of this conference, she was typified in Deborah and in Jael. These valiant virago-like women could only do what they did because of Blessed Mary at the center. You see, she is the treasure they tapped into. They could only do what they did because of her. Apart from many such examples found in the Old Testament, we have innumerable ones since. In the Old Testament, we've got Judith, we've got Esther. But since then, since the Old Testament has passed and we have the New, we have many other examples we can come across. I'm going to give you 3. Once, shortly after recovering his health from a war wound, St. Ignatius of Loyola was riding a donkey to the shrine of Montserrat to determine what he was to do with his life. While on the way, the ex-soldier, Ignatius, fell in with a Moor, a conquered Muslim still living in Spain. They openly discussed the Blessed Virgin Mary. The Moor did not speak well of her, and they departed company. Shortly afterward, when the road split before him, with one way going up the mountain to the shrine and the monastery of Montserrat, and the other way the Moor went and traveled, Ignatius had to make a decision. Would his zeal is an effect of an intense love. Would his zeal lead him to be a soldier of the world or a soldier of Christ? He let his donkey decide. He let his donkey make the decision whether to go up the mountain or go forward and overtake the Moor and kill him for blaspheming his heavenly queen. The donkey went up the mountain. Unusual for donkeys to go up without encouragement. Ignatius then laid his armor at the foot of the statue of Our Lady. forever to exercise his military zeal first and foremost upon himself. This he did by living a very austere and penitential life. Shortly thereafter, Our Lady came to him and helped him compose the famous spiritual exercises, which have helped convert and save countless souls. Number 2, why we have this picture here before you tonight, this image. The great 13th century Spanish king, Fernando III, he's a saint, he's incorrupt, was never injured in all the many battles he fought against the Muslim Moors. Many battles did he fight as he pushed them nearly out of Spain, isolating them in Granada in the Reconquista of Spain, leaving their final expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, to the great Catholic Queen Isabella 2 centuries later. This holy king never lost a battle and would often go into an ecstasy while fighting for the cause of Christianity against the infidels. The reason? He placed on his saddle an ivory statue of Our Lady holding His Majesty. He never forgot her. He never forgot his Lord and his mother. When the king was asked, "Lord, why is it that you are always victorious?" something that cannot be said of any other king, Fernando answered him simply, "Perhaps others have different motives, such as the goal of enlarging their kingdoms." But he continued, lifting up his eyes to heaven, "Thou, O Lord, thou seest my heart as you see the heart of each man. Know that I do not seek my own honor, but thine. Not the greatness of a perishable reign, but the kingship of Christ on earth." In the year 1248, the saintly king was laying siege to the city of Seville, the greatest and strongest of the Andalusian cities. This battle would be the most difficult and the greatest of all his victories. In fact, it almost failed, as the siege was long and hard. The Catholic army lacked numbers to completely besiege the city. The Saracens fought fiercely with the advantage of position within the heavily fortified, double-walled city with 166 towers, and they had access to a river that would take them to the ocean. Nevertheless, after receiving guidance from heaven through the vision of Saint Isidore of Seville, the siege began in July 1247. But victory seemed elusive as long months dragged one on after the other. But a whole summer later, 1248, they were still besieging the city. The trial passed almost beyond human endurance. Men literally died from the stifling heat and the severe conditions. And they gave the impression that the boiling air had been sent up from the very pits of hell. As if this new affliction were not enough, at the same time a deadly sickness struck Fernando's camp that began to take the lives of many men, including some of his closest friends and advisors. Heartfelt losses for the king. To make matters worse, the royal coffers financing the campaign were almost empty. All this started to demoralize Fernando's spirit, submerging him into a deep anguish that he had never before experienced. He was depressed and close to despair. What to do? Knowing his disposition, his beloved wife, Joan, secretly commissioned 2 artists who turned out to be angels, because they disappeared and locked the door. No one knew where they went because they were inside. They made a statue of Our Lady holding His Majesty as a special gift for the King's Chapel, now known as the Virgin of the Kings. Once completed, she prayed before this statue and placed it where it belonged. Upon discovering the beautiful gift from his wife, the king prostrated himself before his heavenly king and queen, pleading for assistance. He prayed, "Help me, my lady, intercede with thy son. Help me and defend me. Thou art the mother of mercy. So dost thou not see, my lady, how thy sons are in very great toils and combat and sufferings of hunger, illnesses, and deaths? So many and such that they can endure it no longer. Dost thou not see, lady, how the devil attempts to sow doubts in me that I will not make thee the queen of the city of Seville, where so many of thy sons and servants loved thee so much?" After more prayer, the statue spoke to him, and he responded without any hesitation, "What dost thou want of me, lady?" She said, "You have a constant helper in my image of the Virgin de la Antigua that you love so much, and which is in Seville." This is a very ancient picture. Goes back to the early centuries of the church. She then said in a sweet but persuasive tone, "Continue, because you shall win. Virgin de la Antigua, the virgin of antiquity, the virgin of tradition. She likes to recover old things." The good king then entered into a sort of ecstasy, and unmolested went mysteriously out of his own camp, past the sentries, into the enemy's occupied city of Seville, with the doors opening automatically. He had an angelic guide. He entered the mosque, which was near the gates, which turns out was a Catholic church once upon a time. It was the cathedral. He knelt before a blank wall to pray, and suddenly the paint faded away, and there before him shone the original painting of the Virgin of Antigua. They had plastered it up to protect it when the Moors were taking over Spain. He was reassured of complete victory, which did happen practically the next day. The Muslim Moors completely surrendered and left the city shortly thereafter. The Virgin of the King's statue is still processed yearly in Seville. Another important example for those who have already been taken captive, imprisoned in some dungeon of the world, some dungeon of the flesh or the devil, chained to vice in some dungeon. We need help. We've been captured. So many today, feeling the attacks on their faith, have given way, often due to discouragement. This is not surprising when so little is left to protect our faith and morals. No more Christian kings and kingdoms, no more nobility. This is not surprising with fewer and fewer faithful and dedicated bishops and priests, as well as the general loss of tradition. Oh, how we need the Virgin of Antiquity. Come back. This is not surprising with the constant lying and fake news, bad judges, foolish leaders we now have. And so many are feeling rather weak and is easily run away from the fight or just give way to temptations to enslavement by the world of flesh and the devil. Many have fallen away with no one to rescue them or ransom them from such vice and error. Some don't even know they're in a dungeon and totally captured and enslaved and in irons. But God has a way for us to escape, a scaling ladder to get us out and make a run for it, to come home to the city of God, to be refit with armor for the fight, to fight the good fight under the standard of the Holy Cross. Seems to me God's answer to this problem lies in the old section of Quito, Ecuador, where there are many beautiful chapels and shrines that are literally only blocks apart. Most of these beautifully ornate churches were built and maintained by various religious communities. And this is where the miraculous statue of Our Lady of Good Success is located, in the convent of the Conceptionists, downtown Quito, historic Quito. One of these chapels belonging to the Mercedarians, it's only a few blocks away, houses a miraculous statue of Our Lady of Ransom, Our Lady of Mercy, whose feast day is September 24th. It's called La Merced. The outside has various architectural features of note, things like beautiful green domes and a large bell tower. But of special interest is the Arabian influence on parts of the building. It is clearly Spanish, with traces of Moorish patterns still felt in various architectural features. These external attributes give a hint of what is waiting for us on the inside. Upon entering this prayerful and exquisite church, we find remarkable and beautiful statues, especially one of Our Lady of Mercy. It is well established that this statue is miraculous, made of solid stone, even from the native volcanic rock found nearby. This very heavy stone statue puts on display the immobility of the faith, the immobility of Our Lady, the Mother of God. Furthermore, one notices that on every pillar, of which there are many, which are large and square pillars, they're square in shape, are found numerous paintings. And most of these paintings display previous miracles performed in that area by the intercession of Our Lady of Mercy. They depict rescues from various elements of the world, such as from fires, volcanoes, earthquakes, from floods and drowning. But also depicted are the Mercedarian martyrs and saints, some shown in the midst of their martyrdom. For example, one bishop is shown with a sword through his head. The Mercedarians, the Order of Our Lady of Mercy and the Redemption of Captives, is a congregation of men founded in 1218 by Peter Nolasco, whose feast was last Saturday. He found this order at the request of our Blessed Mother. He was assisted by the Dominican confessor, Saint Raymond of Penafort, the Canon of Barcelona, as well as King James of Aragon. The development of the order was immediate and widespread throughout much of Western Europe. Their apostolate, and this is the point, was to ransom and rescue souls from the enslavement to the Muslims. Saracens, those of Abraham without Sarah, Saracens, they're of Ishmael. And this they did. It does not take much imagination to see how those enslaved could easily lose hope and confidence, their faith not being strong enough to endure the trial at hand, leading them to submit to the false doctrines of Islam in order to receive better treatment and to avoid painful and ultimately untimely death. Submit, give in. We'll treat you well. For this reason, the members of that order took a fourth vow to ransom, even die for another who is in danger of losing their faith. In 1272, their religious rule read, "All the brothers of the order must always be gladly disposed to give up their lives, if it be necessary, as Jesus Christ gave up his life for us." And in another place is mentioned the need to surrender of one's life as hostage in Saracen territory. Thus, one formulation of the vow read, "I will remain in person and in the power of the Saracens if it be necessary for the redemption of Christ's faithful." And so, not surprisingly, the chapel La Merced in Quito, Ecuador, in the very back of the church is found a large painting of various men, women, and children being ransomed from their Muslim captors by these white-robed sons of Our Lady of Ransom. Our Lady of Mercy, These good religious, solid in their faith, exchange places with the weak to prevent them from losing their souls. Because of the wrath under which we are laboring at this time, the Mercedarians have modified their fourth vow to read, "In order to fulfill this mission, we, impelled by love, consecrate ourselves to God with a special vow, by virtue of which we promise to give up our lives, as Christ gave up his life for us, should it be necessary, in order to save those Christians who find themselves in extreme danger of losing their faith by new forms of captivity." New forms of captivity. Electronic media, that's a new form. Electronic devices. How many are captivated by these things? Here then is our S model scaling ladder to heaven. A scaling ladder into the heart of God, to the sacred heart of His Majesty. An immovable scaling ladder out of vice. It is Our Lady and her sacramentals, her beautiful images, her rosary and scapulars. Using them well, we will win even the most difficult of battles, even when we are often up against incredible odds. She has power over all the natural and preternatural forces of the world, the earth, the wind, fire, and water, as put on display in the chapel in Quito. Did she not show us at Fatima? She has power over all of these, even more, by opening up hell below the ground, in the ground below, by moving the sun out of the sky. Whence comes this power over all the elements of the world? But from access to her divine Son. Through her intimate union with His Majesty, she is able to ransom us from the deepest dungeons of the enemy. I have read how men enslaved to the most shameful of vices have conquered, gained complete freedom, returned to regular practice of their faith and to a decent life. How? They prayed the rosary, and they prayed it lots, even up to 10 or more times a day. But the price was paid, and they were freed. They scaled the ladder. Just as Hernan Cortez and King Fernando were up against determined dark forces impossible to surround and conquer on human terms, so too we are often up against unconquerable organized evil and dark powers set on global domination and destruction of the Holy Catholic faith. These nefarious things are just too powerful, too big, too deeply rooted and organized to surround and defeat. We need help. We need a Deborah. We need a Jael. Nay, we need the Queen Lady of all victories. She is our footgear that crushes Satan's head in all times and places without fail. He has no protection against her foot. He has no headgear to protect himself. No wonder Our Lady of Lourdes has roses on her feet, and they glowed golden. Once again, using other terms, when the entropy of the world reaches levels that approach melting points, God has to intervene. And He does this by exposing us to His treasure chest, His ark at the center of time. Thus, time and time again, Our Lady appears in some way to rescue us, such that order is reestablished and entropy is reduced. Thus we have all her interventions and apparitions down through time. Lepanto, Rudebac, La Salette, Lourdes, Fatima, and many, many, many others. She brings about order by showing us the battle plan of God, which we find captured by the Ark of the Covenant of old, God's treasured chest of armor. This ark of old, a type of Our Lady with His Majesty, and what it contains, this ark, show us in symbol form what the most effective means of fighting the battle with the ancient serpent will include. That is God's battle plan. We've been through this before, but we go through it briefly tonight. So there's 4 parts. First, there's devotion to the ark itself. The ark is God's footstool. We even totally consecrate ourselves to Jesus living in Mary by placing ourselves in the ark. To be safe. Here then is our footgear, the footstool. Second, frequent use of the most blessed sacrament, the jar of manna, the sacrament of charity, sacrament of love. Through frequent attendance at the Holy Mass, receiving Holy Communion well, and adoring the Lord outside of Mass, here then is our shield. Third, frequent use of the sacrament of confession, wherein the shepherd of the sheep will bind and loose our sins, healing us of all our wounds, working miracles of grace, the miracle-working rod. Here then is our sword. It cuts. And finally, frequent study and contemplation of the sacred scriptures. The 10 Commandments symbolize this, the stone tablets. Teachings of the church we study in the lives of the saints. Here then is our belt of truth and our helmet of salvation. In this way, with these things, we are placed under His wings, in His armory, His treasured chest of armor, such that the Scripture is fulfilled, most notably the 90th Psalm of David. He will overshadow thee with His shoulders, and under His wings, the angel's wings, thou shalt trust, such that He will deliver us from the snare of the hunters, from the sharp word. His truth shall compass thee with a shield. We shall not be afraid of the terror of the night, or of the arrow that flieth in the day. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. No evil will come nigh thee, nor the scourge come near thy dwelling. For He hath given His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. Thou shalt walk upon the asp and the basilisk. You have the footgear. You can walk on these now. And thou shalt trample underfoot the lion and the dragon. Because he hoped in me, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he hath known my name. And he shall cry to me, and I will hear him. I am with him in tribulation. I will deliver him, and I will glorify him. I will show him my salvation. King David, thank you. Consecration places us under the wings, His wings, God's wings. And embracing the ark and all that she contains brings us assured victory over the devil and all his forces arrayed here on earth. And all our sacramental characters come into play to keep the Antichrist at bay. It promises us a sure scaling ladder to the church triumphant above. And it brings us angelic aid. More on that in a moment. If we want her most gracious and efficacious aid to gain the victory, however, we have to be like Barak. Humble. Letting her help us, as did Deborah help him. It was humility that saved Ignatius from going after the Moor. It was humility that made King Fernando prostrate himself before his queen and plead for help. Humility is an essential requirement in using the S model weapons that heaven provides us against the Model D weapons of hell. Do we not say, pride cometh before the fall? Thus we can also invert that, reverse it, and say, Humility cometh before the rescue and final victory. Pride cometh before the fall. Humility, humility, humility cometh before the rescue and the final victory. In order to make this clear, consider the warlike game of chess, whose object is to checkmate the king, even the King of Kings. In doing this, as everyone knows, the most capable, most versatile, most powerful piece on the board is the queen, who, by the way, is Queen Isabel. That's when they changed the chess game, so the queen could move everywhere, because of what Queen Isabella did in the Reconquista of Spain. St. Teresa of Jesus compares our life to this chess game, declaring, "There is no queen like humility for making the king surrender. It was humility that drew the king from heaven to the womb of the Virgin." She was able to checkmate the king. How? Humility. This fundamental and essential virtue acts like a supernatural magnet, greatly attracting God. He cannot resist it. While the devil is wonderfully repelled by it, like a magnet, he can't get close. God saw the unparalleled humility of the Blessed Virgin, and it drew him from heaven. He whom the whole world could not contain, humility and love imprisoned in the Queen's womb. St. Teresa continues, "The one who has more humility will be the one who possesses him more. The one who has less will possess him less." The Queen possessed perfect humility, and so she possesses the King of Kings perfectly. She checkmated him. He surrenders to humility and fights for the humble soul. When one has God on his side, there is no doubt about the victory. Many have been checkmated by the Queen to surrender to her and her Lord. She gave an image of herself to Juan Diego a little over a decade after Hernan Cortez gained the military victory over the Aztecs. But these Aztecs had yet to convert spiritually. They were defeated physically, but not spiritually. The battle was still raging for their souls. This heavenly image had the King of the universe checkmated in her womb. When the Indians saw it, they converted. Over the next several years, nearly 8 million converted. In 1842, the determined anti-Catholic Alphonse Ratisbonne, a Jewish lawyer and banker, converted after wearing a miraculous medal. He played chess with the Queen. He lost and went through a rapid and deep conversion and was baptized Marie 11 days later. Not long after, he was ordained priest. Up against incredible odds, impossible odds, an Aztec empire of vice, a stone-walled and well-fortified habit like Seville, chained up deep in the dungeons of the enemy, sunken in the muddy mire of sin. Time to grow in humility and compunction before this Queen, and she will gain the victory with the aid of her checkmated king. But are we truly humble? Do we respectfully submit ourselves to legitimate authority when submission is due? Do we treat them respectfully regardless of whether they deserve it or not, or whether we like them or not? Do we give due homage to the King of Kings present in the tabernacle, bending our right knee in genuflection, ordering everything to him on a daily basis? Are we humble enough to confess all our sins to His Majesty, acting through His priest, no matter how embarrassing they may be? Are we humble enough to stay in the pew if we're not ready to receive His Majesty in Holy Communion? Are we humble enough to dress modestly at all times, not just for Mass? Not to think we are big boys and big girls, making exceptions for the rules for ourselves. I'm a big boy now. I'm a big girl. I can do this. The minute you talk like that, you're in really big trouble. Pride cometh before the fall. Humility cometh before the rescue. Better to stay small and not become big. Before we close this mission, we need to look at our general, who is St. Michael the Archangel, whose name is a sort of definition of humility. Who is like unto God? St. Michael most likely was the very same angel that led St. Ferdinand III into Seville. He's always at the Queen's beck and call. He does her bidding for humble souls. Examples are not wanting. In 1949, fascinating event happened. A 13-year-old Lutheran boy became possessed by multiple demons through a Ouija board he received from his recently deceased spiritualist aunt. This happened inside the Beltway of Washington, D.C. I think it's typological. I think it's symbolizing what's in store for our country. He was taken from the Washington, D.C. area where he was possessed, Mount Rainier, Maryland, to St. Louis, to the King's City. Once there, under the care of a good Jesuit, Father Bowdern, rector of St. Francis Xavier, the boy converted to the Holy Catholic faith and was exorcised over some months. As the grueling work approached its end, the devil said he would not come out unless the boy spoke one word. And he laughed viciously because the boy would not be able to say it. In fact, one devil said, Robbie must make 9 communions. I think that's kind of an indication of the importance of the 9 First Friday communions. A way God gave us to checkmate the King of Kings. He said, Robbie must make 9 communions, and then I will leave. The voice of the devil laughed and said about making spiritual communions, as some thought sufficient. That isn't enough, he said. He has to say one more word, one little word, one big word. He'll never say it. He has to make 9 communions. He'll never say the word, I'm always in him. I may not have much power always, but I am in him. He will never say the word. From Robbie came a new voice, though. A clear, masterful voice, rich and deep. Satan, Satan, I am St. Michael, and I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave the body in the name of Dominus. Immediately, now, Dominus. That Bowdern, Father Bowdern, realized was the word that the demon had said that Robbie would never speak. Now began the most violent contortions of the entire period of the exorcism, in what was the fight to the finish. For 7 or 8 minutes, Robbie screamed and twisted in the bed. Then he calmly said, he's gone. Robbie looked around at the priest and the brothers and said he was feeling fine. Robbie was radiant as he told the priest what had just happened, what he had seen in his mind's eye. It was a dream, yet it was more than a dream. There was something real about it. He said that he saw a beautiful figure with flowing, waving hair, standing in a brilliant white light. He wore a white garment that clung closely to his body and seemed to be made of mail. Robbie sensed that the figure was an angel in bodily form. In his right hand, the angel held a fiery sword. And with his left hand, he pointed down to a pit or a cave where the devil stood amid flames, surrounded by the other demons. Robbie could feel the heat of the fire. The devil laughing madly charged towards the angel and tried to fight him. The angel turned toward Robbie and smiled, then faced the devil and uttered the word Dominus. And the devil and his demons ran back to what was now clearly a cave. They disappeared into it. Robbie saw bars on the entrance and the letters spelling out spite. S-P-I-T-E. Next time you feel like being spiteful, don't forget that. It's from hell. As the demons vanished, Robbie said he felt a tugging in his stomach. Isn't that interesting? The devils were leaving him, and where was the last place he felt them? His stomach. How do we cast out demons? Prayer and fasting. They like to attack us through our bellies. Then something seemed to snap, he said, and suddenly he relaxed and was happy. The happiest he had been since the whole ordeal had started. Meanwhile, a vision of St. Michael was seen in the apse of St. Francis Xavier by the Jesuits praying there. Who is like unto God? As St. Thomas teaches, what is first in any order is the cause of all that follows it. Ever wonder why St. Michael is given the title Archangel? Because he is the first in the order, that's why. Ever wonder why St. Michael is the angel invoked in the Confiteor at the Holy Mass? Or is the angel that leads departed souls to heaven we chant and see in the Requiem Mass? He was the first in the order of the saints, that's why. He sacrificed his excellence most humbly of all the angels, most humbly, more than all the other angels. He sacrificed his excellence on the first day of creation. And he, St. Michael, led the way into heaven. He led the battle against the dragon. He was first in the order. Although not the greatest of the angels by nature, Lucifer was. He nevertheless sacrificed himself more perfectly than all the other angels. And so St. Michael becomes a participant in all the saintly and angelic causes that follow. And so St. Michael is powerful. Even the great St. Gabriel needed St. Michael's assistance in casting out the demon, the prince of Persia, before he could approach Daniel and explain the 70 weeks of years. In the reverse way, Lucifer, as the first to rebel, became the cause of all the evil that follows. In this way, we can safely attribute all diabolical and evil to him. We noted earlier in this mission that our human nature, most notably as found in Jesus and Mary, was at the center of the original angelic conflict. And so it remains so today and unto the end. Thus the devil ceaselessly works to destroy human souls, while St. Michael is the one who leads them to heaven, victorious in the great battle. We are the battleground. St. John states, "Woe to the earth and to the sea, because the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, knowing that he hath but a short time." The battle centers around our human nature, simply because it is found on earth in a form that can still be conquered. Those fighting to be like the God-man, His Majesty Jesus Christ, and His holy and pure Virgin Mother, they belong to the Church, and she is embattled. Thus we belong to the Church militant. This makes us soldiers of Christ, and we belong to an army whose captain is St. Michael, the first saint. And this is one way we poor limited and fallen humans can and must fight so many demons. The good angels have to help us. It is the duty of the angelic armies, the heavenly angelic armies, to counter the wicked infernal fiends. We are not alone. The demons cannot win against a far superior force that is armed with the lights and grace of heaven. Therefore, we must have confidence that these good angels will be victorious in the struggle taking place in our very midst. If we cooperate with them, we too will be victorious. As St. John shows in the Apocalypse, the church will be forever triumphant, especially aided by angels, guided by St. Michael. Humility is required for enrollment. Again, Examples help, and history comes to our aid as this great Saint Michael led the way before Joshua in conquering the Holy Land so long ago. Thus we read in the book of Joshua, when Joshua was in the field of the city of Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and he saw a man standing over against him, holding a drawn sword. And he went to him and he said, "Art thou one of ours, or of our adversaries?" And he answered, "I am the prince of the host of the Lord, and now I am come." Joshua fell on his face to the ground, and worshiping said, "What saith my Lord to his servant?" "Loose, loose," he said, "the shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy." And Joshua did as he was commanded. This mysterious man is held to be Saint Michael. Saint Michael was the first to appear to the young Saint Joan of Arc, beginning in her 13th year. Her 13th year, she only lived to be 19. He told Joan that Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret would soon follow. Her descriptions of Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret were of gentle comforters. They were sweet. Whereas Saint Michael, she said, was brilliant and bold and stern. St. Joan says of their relationship, "Above all, St. Michael told me that I must be a good child and that God would help me. He taught me to behave rightly and to go often to church." It seems clear from the record that he was the one who taught her the faith so perfectly that she could stand up against a court of stern prelates and theologians, besting them each time, even unto the end. So is the effect of being guided by St. Michael. And finally, at Portugal, the children at Fatima had 3 main encounters with an angel naming himself the Angel of Peace, the Angel of Portugal. It seems this great angel was none other than St. Michael, because Portugal has a long history of naming this leader of God's army as its patron and protector. Starting with the first king of Portugal, all of us should know how he prepared the shepherd children to meet up and climb up the scaling ladder to heaven, to meet up with Our Lady and climb up that scaling ladder to heaven. He purged them of immaturity. He made them memorize prayers, practice penance, and be reverent before the Eucharist while making reparation, receiving their first Holy Communion from him in great awe. Under his guidance, they became immovable in the faith and ready to climb up to heaven. Clearly, St. Michael cares about the church militant. He is the prince and general of her armies. He wants to do for us what he did for these captains and soldiers of previous victorious battles, so that we will conquer in this dark time. We must be willing to take off the sandals of our worldliness and do penance and be open to his purging presence. Then, as King David declared in the Psalms, the angel of the Lord shall encamp around about them that fear him and shall deliver them. What we've learned tonight, at the center of all time, we have the treasure exposed for all to see and partake in Our Lady of Sorrows at the foot of the cross. She is the footstool of God, the footgear of peace, crushing Satan's head. She's the valiant woman, the virago of God, the immovable scaling ladder to heaven, the ransom for those trapped in enemy dungeons. Awesome. Pray the rosary, follow her example, consecrate all to her, readily give all you have to be hers, and she will readily share all that God has given her, His Majesty Himself. In this ark, God's treasure chest, we will find the complete armor of God. Strive for humility, the virtue of Our Lady. that makes her so powerful with God. Pride cometh before the fall. Humility cometh before the rescue. God will not rescue the proud soul. We must sacrifice our excellence. The more perfectly we sacrifice it, the more quickly will the victory be ours. We must risk something for God. St. Michael is the first saint to enter heaven and the general of God's army. To make us his victorious soldiers to fight in his army, we must submit to his purging our immaturity and pray, be reverent, penitential, making everything a meritorious sacrifice, making reparation for all the wrongs, abuses, and sacrileges suffered by his majesty in the Holy Eucharist. That's what he taught the children of Fatima. And finally, be sure to pray to St. Michael at the beginning of every good work. Holy Archangel Michael, defend us in the battle, that we may not perish in the dreadful judgment. Holy Archangel Michael, first of all the saints, lead our souls to heaven when our time comes to leave behind this great tribulation. May we always be numbered among your company.